On October 27th, 1989, 11-year-old Amy Mihaljevic left school and walked to the Bay Square shopping center. Two of her friends witnessed her leave with an adult male. About an hour later, Amy called her mother, telling her that she had been at choir auditions. Amy, however, never returned home. Welcome to Fact and Suspicion. I'm your host, Dan, here with my co-host, Ben.
Hello.
And if you are watching us on YouTube, for the first time, we are appearing on video.
We are officially a video podcast. I promised. It took a while, admittedly, but we're here. Now, if things aren't perfect, please bear with us. This is a work in progress. We're not exactly sure what we're doing just yet, but we're learning as we go. So again, bear with us.
And if you have, any, tips for us, if you've experienced any of these things, let us know.
Any constructive criticism.
Yeah, don't be too harsh.
Apart from get better looking podcasters, because not a lot we can do there.
No. We'll probably hear that though.
That's probably true.
Maybe.
But we will definitely hear that. Internet comments can be cruel, man.
That's true.
Luckily, we got thick skin.
Hope so. Anyway, let's get on into today's episode. We're discussing Amy Mihaljevic by popular demand.
Yeah, this is easily the single most requested case we've had. I would say probably 70% of our emails are asking us to cover this case.
Yeah, a
and
lot.
It's one that I know almost nothing about.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with it myself. I'd heard of Amy Mihaljevic. I knew some basics of it, but this was a huge case. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with James Renner. This was actually his first true crime case.
He was the Maura Murray journalist, right?
Yes, yeah.
I remember him. I read his book when he talks about becoming obsessed with the case.
Yeah,
it's a good book. I forget the title, but
right. Well, he actually wrote a book about Amy Mihaljevic as well.
Oh, I didn't know
that. This was the case that got him into true crime. And this was actually also an early episode of America's Most Wanted.
Is that the John Walsh show?
That is, yes.
Okay.
And as I said, it was an early episode of that. This was one of the first big, national media attention missing persons cases. But yeah, it ended up being really interesting stuff that I can't believe that I wasn't familiar with it. Right.
All right. Sounds interesting. Let's get into it.
Let's get started. So Amy Mihaljevic was 11 years old. She was a fifth grader. She was from Bay Village, Ohio. Now that is a suburb of Cleveland in Cuyahoga County. And it was, by all accounts, a very safe place to live. They didn't lock their doors at night a lot of times. So no one expected something like this to happen. Right. Amy also, she loved to ride horses. She and her mom both went riding a lot at a local farm. And it's just, a normal kid, a happy kid.
It's kind of an expensive hobby, isn't it? Well,
this was, I'm not going to say affluent, but it was a upper middle class sort of area.
And they didn't own the horses, right?
No, they didn't. They just went and rode the horses that belonged to the farm. But yeah, she had a comfortable life. She was a happy kid, a pretty normal kid. But let's get started with the story here. On October 27th, 1989, she went to school like normal. She and her brother rode their bikes to school. And usually after school every day, she would ride her bike home. However, she didn't. On this particular day, she left her bike at school and she walked to the Bay Square shopping center with some of her friends.
I assume her mom was unaware of this?
No,
or parents, rather?
She was not. And it wasn't a shopping mall. It was sort of like a little strip mall. They're pretty common in a lot of small communities. I mean, we've got them in our small town. You might have a grocery store and some other things right in one little strip mall, right? I don't think they had a grocery store here, but they had those kind of shops and stuff. I know there was a Baskin Robbins because a couple of her friends saw her standing outside of that Baskin Robbins.
Was that the last place they saw her?
Yes. They saw her standing outside of the Baskin Robbins, and they saw a man in his early to mid 30s approach her, and then they walked away together.
And they didn't recognize the guy, I think.
They did not recognize the man, no. Now, I should go ahead and explain now why Amy left with this guy. Because as the police found out a bit later, Amy had actually been contacted by this person on the telephone at home.
Really?
Yes.
That's creepy.
He told her that he worked with her mother and that her mother was getting a promotion at work. And he told her that he was going to take her out to buy a present for her mom.
Was that true?
Well,
did he know the mother well enough to know she had gotten a promotion? Or
actually,
did he make that up?
She had not gotten a promotion. Now, something, an interesting bit of information, though, is Amy's mom, Margaret, had recently gone from part-time to full-time at work. So Amy may have taken that as being a promotion.
It was plausible.
Yeah, plausible for her to hear that. But it doesn't seem like he actually knew anything about her mom. Now, apparently he told Amy, though, that the reason he was taking her shopping instead of her brother is that she would be more likely to be able to keep a secret.
Oh.
Now, he told her that they had about $45 to spend to buy the gift, and if they had anything left over, that Amy could get something for herself. And, yeah.
What kind of piece of garbage uses a kid's love for their mother like that?
A real sicko. But honestly, also, it seems like someone who may have done something like this before.
Really? Is there evidence of that?
No evidence, but just, he seemed to have a good story. He knew what to say.
That's true.
Right?
It did seem well rehearsed.
Yeah. Well, there is a little bit of stuff we'll get into in a bit about, some other phone calls maybe. But let's go on and move on with what happened after Amy went missing.
Okay.
So Amy walked to the shopping center. She got out of school about 2:00. Okay. Now, two of her friends saw her speaking with this man between 2:30 and 2:45.
Did they get a description?
Yes. We actually have a composite drawing. There were two people that witnessed it, two girls. And actually, there are two composite drawings, one from each girl.
Okay.
They're pretty similar, but they went ahead and did one for each girl instead of trying to mash them up together. And
you said they were similar?
Yeah, they're pretty similar.
Do we? Are those publicly available?
Yeah. Well, we could pop some up on screen, right?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah. That's no problem.
Right. Now,
as long as you tell me where to get them.
Yeah. I'll link them to you.
Okay.
Here in a bit. Now, as I said, that was about 2:30, 2:45.
Okay.
Now, 3:10, Amy's brother Jason gets home, and Amy's not there. He expected her to be home. So he went ahead and called their mom at work, and he told her Amy wasn't home. And, Margaret panicked a bit.
Yeah, understandable.
She was getting ready to leave work early to come check on Amy. But at 3:30, she actually got a call from Amy.
At 3:30, had she already been abducted by this point?
Yeah, it was about 2:30 to 2:45 when she was seen with the man and left with him.
So whether she knew it or not at this point, she was with her captor.
Yes, exactly. Now, Margaret took it that Amy was at home now when she made this call. Amy told her that she had gone to choir auditions after school, and that's why she wasn't there. So,
is there any indication that she was under duress while making this call?
A little bit, actually, because after the phone call, Margaret at first was relieved that Amy was home, but then after she got off the phone, she realized that something wasn't right. She thought Amy didn't really quite sound like herself.
So something about the call seemed off to the mom.
Definitely. Well, she said that Amy would usually kind of talk her ear off, talk about a lot of stuff, and she seemed like she was in a hurry to get off the phone this time. So that was weird. And after a little while of thinking about it, Margaret went ahead and left work early to go home and check on it.
Okay.
Now, she did go back home and realized that Amy was not there. She got home between 4 and 4:30. And when Amy wasn't there, she immediately went to school.
Is that where the choir practice was supposed to be?
Yeah, the choir audition. She was expecting her to be at school for choir auditions, or that's what Amy told her. So she went to school to check on it.
Right.
Now, when she gets there, Amy's bike is still in the bike rack outside of the school. and she tries to go in to see if there's choir auditions going on, but she can't get into the school. It's
I bet
locked
she's
up.
panicking by this point.
No choir auditions. She is panicking, and she went straight to the police department. Now, she got to the police station. She told them what was going on. Normally, they would not put out a big APB at this point. They would expect that the child maybe was a runaway, that they'd come back home pretty soon.
Right.
But because Margaret really felt like something was wrong, and she convinced the police officers that she felt like something was wrong, they went ahead and immediately put out an APB looking for Amy.
That's good. I mean, it's great to have a case on occasion where both the family of the victim and the police act appropriately immediately.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately pretty rare.
Yeah.
Now, I guess the cops are more likely to take a missing child seriously. But with adults, we often see days go by before anything serious is done.
And we've seen it with children as well.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But this one was not one of those cases. They started looking for Amy immediately. Her dad, I mean, he got home from work after all this, right? And had no idea any of this was going on. So that just sort of floors him when he gets home, but he immediately leaves, starts driving up and down the roads looking for Amy. He's got friends out looking for her as well.
I think that's exactly what I would do too.
Yeah. And by that night on the nightly news, they had Amy's picture on the news telling everyone she was missing, looking for her.
So there was an organized search by this point?
Yes, they're looking for Amy at this point.
Okay.
Now, it was probably not, well, I say probably, it wasn't until the next day when they start interviewing Amy's friends that they find out about this phone call. She had told her friends at school about that. I say fortunately she told her friends at school about that. It didn't help Amy in the long run. But we do have information because of that. Also, her brother Jason had overheard a little bit of one of these conversations. Now, we're not sure if this man called Amy more than once. We know there's obviously at least one phone call. He may have possibly called more than once. We're not sure because it's secondhand information.
Right. Everything we know about it is from her two friends.
Yeah.
Did she ever tell her brother about it?
I'm not saying two friends, actually. Like it was, we don't know exactly who she told at school about it. But these two friends that were just the witnesses of who saw her speak to this.
And she never told her brother about it either?
No, she didn't tell him about it, but he did overhear a little bit of a conversation on the phone once. So he
probably didn't put that together until after the fact.
No. Now, speaking of the phone calls, police discovered that there were some other phone calls to other girls that were very similar to this.
So they think it was the same guy? Were the stories similar, like what he said to them?
Yeah, there were similar type stories to try to lure them out of the house, go shopping, stuff like that. And there were several reports of them. It's hard to know exactly how many there were.
Right.
Because you get different reports from media outlets, from, not necessarily from the police. But the police themselves had said that there are 2 or 3 other calls that they do believe are connected. It seemed like they were saying there were more calls that were, possibly made that were similar. Right. But they do believe that 2 or 3 of them are definitely connected to Amy, probably made by the same person.
I don't suppose they could trace the calls at that point.
No, it seems like they were probably made from a local phone number. And at the time, they just didn't really keep records of local calls. Right. So they don't know who made the calls. Now, they did try to find out anything that these girls had in common. If they, went to the same school, if they hung out the same places, maybe went to the same church, something like that.
Right.
And they did find one connection, and it was the Lake Erie Nature and Science Center. And in the weeks leading up to Amy's abduction, all of them had been to that science center.
All of the girls who received calls?
Yes.
And were they all girls?
As far as I know, that was never actually clarified, but it seems like
fair assumption.
Yeah. Like one of them actually has done some interviews about it. We know that was a lady, well, a girl at the time. She's a lady now, obviously. But also now, by reports, everyone that visited that nature center had to sign a logbook that did as I've read, include putting down their phone numbers.
That's odd. Was that standard at the time?
Yeah, I really don't know. Maybe they had them do that so they could keep track of people, try to get them to come back for other things,
Maybe
stuff
so.
like that.
Yeah, because these days, there's email.
Right.
It's so much easier to contact people. I guess that was not really the only way back then.
Maybe. Now, police never actually found that logbook. So maybe it's possible that it never existed, or it's possible that maybe someone took it to get rid of some evidence. Also very interesting in connection with the logbook is that some of these people that received the calls had unlisted phone numbers.
Really?
Yeah. So it's not like they could just get that out of the phone book.
Do we know if there were any other missing persons cases in the area that could have possibly have been linked?
There have actually been several other cases that people have tried to link to this one, but there's no real connection. There's nothing that we can really tie to it. But in this particular case, that was pretty much all of the evidence and information up until February.
Okay.
So in February, well, actually on February 8th of 1990, a woman was jogging in Nova, Ohio. That's in Ashland County. And she came across a body about 20 feet off the road in a field. I
knew this wasn't going to end well, but I'm making it easier.
She reported that to police, and later that day, by dental records, they confirmed it was Amy.
So the obvious question, now that they found the body, were there signs of a sexual assault?
Well,
I can't imagine another motive.
Yeah, let's do just
small girls.
A little bit of a content warning here. I'm going to talk about the coroner's report and the state of the body. So a little bit of content warning. This is a child. If you need to fast forward a little bit, you should do that now.
Fair enough.
So, according to the coroner's report, multiple stab wounds to the neck and a blunt impact to the head were both listed as causes of death.
Well, I was just about to ask which one they thought was the cause of death. So yeah,
they list both of them. Maybe they're not sure which one caused it. Maybe it was a combination. But we also have a postmortem wound in the abdominal wall.
It's odd.
That is, and I have no idea. Maybe he was just making sure she was dead at that point. I don't know. Now, according to the report, she did not have any trauma to her genitalia. However, her body was in a state of somewhat advanced decomposition.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say if that would have been very evident.
Right.
There was, however, some blood found in her underwear, which would seem to suggest sexual assault. And as police have stated, they can't see any other reason for the abduction other than to sexually assault.
If not sexually motivated, what other motivation could there possibly be for abducting 11-year-old girls?
Yeah. Oh, you're completely right. As sad as that is.
I mean, I hate to say it. It's just.
One other thing of note is that her underwear were actually on inside out.
The implication that maybe he had undressed her and then redressed her?
Yes. It's possible. Now, I guess it's possible that Amy had accidentally put her underwear on inside out, but more likely that he was redressing her afterward and accidentally did that. Now, let's talk about the scene. One other thing about the body I should mention, it was fully clothed except for her shoes. Her shoes were missing.
They weren't even nearby?
No, they did not find them at all. Now, it's possible that he kept those as a sort of a souvenir, but it's also possible that if he was redressing her, he was having trouble getting them on because they were boots. Mm-hmm. So that may have been difficult to get on, a corpse.
Right. So are the police fairly confident that this was a dumping ground and not actually the site of the murder? Do they know?
They don't know that for sure, but they're pretty confident this was just a place to dispose of the body.
Right.
Now that we're done with just talking about like the more graphic details, I do want to talk about where the body was found. As I said, it was in Ashland County. And now, according to the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's website, the spot the body was found was 46.9 miles from the shopping center where she was abducted, and it's a little over an hour drive.
Okay.
She did have some items missing when they found her that were never recovered. Those shoes were never recovered. Now, I've read two different reports. One report said they were riding boots, like she liked to ride horses. Another said they were just ankle boots. I'm not positive which one they were, but they were likely somewhat distinctive, not super common
Yeah,
shoes.
either way.
Yeah. Now, she was missing a backpack and jacket, which are pretty common items that, anyone could have. Her earrings were extremely unique, though, probably one of a kind. She was wearing some earrings that were jade carved horse heads, and those earrings were not recovered. Now, that seems like possibly kept as a souvenir.
If he took the time to actually take them out of her ear, that sounds like a trophy.
And
I hate to say it, but
no, but that's actually a good thing, because if those are ever recovered, it's a very strong piece of evidence.
Yeah, of course,
because they're so unique. Another very unique item she had that was never recovered was a folder. It was actually a folder her dad gave her. Her dad worked for Buick, and this folder was embroidered with the Buick logo. And it was just really unique because only people that worked for Buick would have something like that.
Right.
Her dad had given it to her just to use for school, and she had it in her backpack. That was never recovered either. So possibly the boots, the earrings for sure in that folder, if anyone ever found those somewhere, if someone opened a drawer somewhere and saw them, that's a very good piece of evidence that, we have now.
Right. I don't know, maybe he burned some of the stuff, but he seems to have kept a lot of stuff. Well, I don't understand, why not dump, particularly the backpack and the boots, why not dump them with the body?
It really doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know. Maybe this is a person who wanted to keep a lot of trophies. Maybe it's someone that had not killed anyone before and was in a panic trying to get rid of the body, left some things. We don't know for sure. We really don't know.
Given the ease at which he told that tale, fabricated that lie to get her alone, that sounds like somebody had probably done this before. Well,
at least someone who had assaulted some girls.
Fair enough.
Not necessarily killed girls before.
That's true, yeah.
We don't know. Now, some other things. One thing that's worth mentioning, I don't know how accurate this is or how much of a piece of evidence this is. The night before Amy's body was found, a woman reported that she was driving down that particular road, and she saw a vehicle stopped on the side of the road very close to where the body was found. She said that a man was standing at the back, and it was a hatchback car. He had the hatch open. He was standing at the hatch. Now, I don't know how good that piece of evidence is. I'm not saying that the woman is wrong.
Right, but there are a million innocuous explanations for that.
Exactly. And the fact that I have heard some investigators state that there was some plant growth around the body that made them think that it had been there for quite a while. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't make sense that he had just dumped her there the night before.
Yeah.
Now, it's possible that it did happen, but it's also possible that someone had a flat tire and was changing their tire.
In fact, far more likely.
Yeah. And also along a rural road like that, when it's dark, it would probably be hard to know exactly which spot you were in, to know exactly where that body was, if he was right there at the body or if maybe he was, a mile down the road.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm not saying anything about the lady that reported it. I'm sure she was telling the truth and she was trying to help, but we don't know if that was the person or not. We don't know how good that evidence is.
There's just not much you can make of that without more information.
Yeah. Now, there is some more evidence I would like to talk about that really did not come to light until much more recently.
New evidence in the case?
Yeah, pretty new evidence. Yeah. Now, when they found Amy's body, they just collected everything on the side of the road, in the field, everything they could find. They
Just
were
making
picking
sure
up,
they didn't miss anything.
right.
At
They
all.
picked up trash, cigarette butts,
So better to get things that aren't involved and miss something.
yeah,
it
just
is.
picking up everything they could find that could be, tied to it. Now, they found, this was about 300 yards away from Amy's body. They found a blanket, which was a pretty common blanket that you could just buy in the store,
Okay.
but also a curtain, which was very unique. It was a handmade curtain, which was actually made from some sort of handmade quilt or blanket, and it had been turned into a curtain. They had like cut a part off and made straps to hang it as a curtain.
Okay. Is the implication there that they think that this was what was used to wrap her body in?
Well, they didn't know at the time, right? They just took all this stuff and they tried to test it, but in 1989, they really don't have the technology to find
DNA would have been in
yet.
its infancy.
But in more recent years, they were able to go through it and keep testing all this stuff. And there's so many things to test. They can't just, test all of it immediately. But in 2016, they announced that they had found on the blanket and on the curtain hairs that belonged to Amy's dog.
Oh. Now, how certain are they that they were her dog? I mean, I know that hair and fiber analysis can be pretty sketchy.
They said they were completely certain that it was her dog. Now, again, not positive how accurate that testing is. But
we'll take them at their word.
The implication would be that obviously Amy had the dog hair on her clothing, was transferred to the blanket.
Right.
Maybe while they were transporting her body wrapped in the blanket, or maybe they put the blanket over her body to hide it in the field.
But they used the word match and not consistent with.
Match, yeah. They used match. Okay. Now, that really becomes sort of a non-factor because in just actually a few months ago, in October of 2021, they announced that with some new DNA testing methods, they were able to determine that Amy's hair was on the blanket as well.
Really?
Yes. So it's not just a dog hair. We have Amy's actual hair on the blanket. So
that's real progress.
We know that the blanket and the curtain are connected, that her body was in contact with them at some point.
And being 300 yards away like that.
It's just luck that they picked it up, really. Yeah. Like, and it would be
diligence, actually.
Yeah. And I'd say that's consistent with the body having been there for quite a while. Let's say her body was covered in it and, over a few months, like the wind blows it, maybe a dog grabs it and carries it. You don't know what could have happened, but it makes sense that it could have made its way quite a ways away from the body.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah. But they found it. They did find it. And that's about all of the evidence we've got. I really want to move into talking about some of the suspects for the case now.
Okay, sounds interesting.
And we have, there are several suspects.
Any that are really strong suspects?
I think some of them are strong. I can't say that there is an abundance of evidence towards any of them, but these are people all people that the police have looked at.
Okay.
At any rate. Now, the first suspect I'd like to talk about is someone who was only very briefly investigated, but he confessed to Amy's murder.
Really?
Yeah. In 2002, this man named Richard Holbert was at Mass at St. Angela Mercy Catholic Church.
Wait, this is going to be a different kind of confession, isn't it?
Yeah, well, he just announced out loud that he had murdered Amy Mihaljevic.
I was thinking confessed to police.
No, I think he did confess to police as well after this.
But he made sure and told Jesus first.
Well, he told Jesus and the whole church that he killed Amy Mihaljevic. And very soon after that, though, police looked into it and found out that he was institutionalized when the abduction occurred.
Well, that's a fair alibi, I'd say.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention it because if you have a confession, you should mention it, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? But he was investigated. The next suspect I'm going to talk about is a much stronger suspect, and possibly was the first real suspect in the case.
Okay.
Very early, at any rate, and his name is Harold Bound.
All right.
Now, if you recall, I mentioned that Amy and her mother liked to go horseback riding at a place called Holly Hill Farms.
Right.
Now, and that place is actually pretty close to the Mihaljevic home.
Oh, is it?
Now,
This wasn't the place that you sign in at, right?
no, that was the nature center.
okay.
That was something like, I think kids maybe went on field trips there and stuff
Okay.
like that. This was just where they went horseback.
Okay,
riding.
I wanted to double check. Make sure.
No connection to the other girls with Holly Hill Farms.
Okay.
But Harold Bound lived and worked at Holly Hill Farms.
Really?
Yes. And his parents actually owned the farm. Now, Harold was a Vietnam veteran. And a lot of the kids that went riding at this farm, they reported that they found him to be pretty creepy. And I'm not going to say it's without cause either. There are reports that people would see him wearing camouflage, carrying a bow, just kind of wandering around the farm.
I guess, hope he was a hunter.
Apparently, he was an avid hunter.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so, right? And that's a reasonable thing to think he's creepy for. Right?
Yeah.
Now, Harold did not have a verifiable alibi. He did willingly interview with police. He let them, search his home. He took multiple lie detector tests, but he was never actually, held by police for this. Now, some really interesting things are some things his brother has said in interviews. His brother has said that Harold came home late the night that Amy was abducted.
How does he know that it was the night of the abduction if this was quite a ways afterwards?
Well, you have to know that police were looking for Amy and investigating very soon after her disappearance.
Mm-hmm.
And the farm was one of the first places they went.
Okay, so he had a pretty vivid memory of this.
So at the time, he would have remembered a few days ago he didn't come home until late. Right. Now, also, Harold's parents were out of town when that happened. They weren't in town at the farm. So that may have given him a little more opportunity there. Also, and this is coming from Harold's brother. He said in an interview that police said that a blue pickup was, Amy was taken away in a blue pickup truck, and the farm did have a blue pickup truck.
Really?
I don't know how accurate that is though, because you have to understand that, police may have said that to him, but police don't always tell you the truth. A lot of times they say something, so they make you think they've got some evidence. They try to trick you into
just to see what your reaction is.
Right. Yeah. Now, also another thing about Harold is that sometime after he was started to be investigated, he checked himself into a VA mental hospital because he said he was having bouts of uncontrollable violence.
He said violence and not rage?
He said violence.
Do we know if he committed any violence?
No, we don't know if he committed any violence, and we don't know if he was actually having these issues. He may have just done that to try to avoid being investigated.
And he volunteered that information to police?
Yeah. Well, I think that's the information he gave to the VA hospital.
Okay.
One of the absolute strangest things that's really most compelling about Harold Bound as a suspect, though, is he gave some conflicting reports to police. Initially, he told them that he didn't know Amy Mihaljevic. He wouldn't be able to recognize her. Even if she did come riding at the stables, he wouldn't know her from any of the other kids that came there.
Right.
However, later on, he told them a story that he had actually met Amy Mihaljevic at one point in time and knew who she was.
Really?
Yeah, he said that one day she and her mother pulled up in her mother's car, and they appeared to be having a fight in the car. And Amy got out, and her mother threw her riding boots out the window at her and then drove off. And then Amy just sort of sat down there in the gravel with the boots. And he said that he walked up to her and asked if she needed some help or anything, and that she just wouldn't talk to him. So he walked away.
Has the mother ever corroborated this story?
No. And honestly, I mean, maybe she could corroborate the fact that they had a fight. But if she pulled off, she wouldn't have known that Harold walked up to speak to her or what happened afterward.
But it seems like she probably would. Might have had a memory of the fight if that had taken place.
Possibly. I don't know if it was ever corroborated. It's not something it's not something the media has at any rate.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Now, the thing with Harold Bound is, and by reports, it's something else his brother said, is that likely one of the reasons he was never prosecuted, while he seems to be a strong suspect, is just the fact that there's just not any real evidence to tie him to it. There's
Right.
nothing hard, right? So I think he's a strong suspect, but again, there's nothing.
I mean, other than that one connection of the place where he worked,
Right. There's nothing to really
and that
tie him
conflicting
to.
story he told.
Yeah. So there's nothing.
So we have a guy who worked at a place that she frequented to ride horses,
Yeah.
and who may or may not have had a brief conversation with her at one point.
Yeah, pretty much. Right. I mean, there's the circumstantial stuff that his brother said he didn't come home that night, stuff like that. But
Right.
that's real. There's not a lot to that. Right?
Yeah.
So let's move on to our next suspect.
Okay.
And this, some people think he's a strong suspect. Some people think there's no way. This is a man named Billy Strunak. Strunak.
Interesting name.
Yeah, it is. He was also a very early suspect. He is someone who volunteered in the search for Amy.
Okay.
He seemed to be injecting himself into the investigation.
Oh.
Now, he looked a good bit like a composite drawing.
Both of them, or one of them in particular?
You could say both of them, really. Mostly one of them in particular.
Okay.
Maybe you can take a look at them at the two. Now, some strange behavior he had. He introduced himself to Amy's mom, and he got to the point where, when she would come in, he would go like hug her, and it was just kind of awkward, right?
Wait, he would hug the mother?
Yeah, right. Because this is someone that's volunteering in the
and
search
this is
efforts.
someone who, up until this point, had never met her.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's strange.
Now, he even actually offered to clean the Mihaljevic home.
Oh, that's just weird.
It's weird, and it does seem like, I don't know, like maybe he's looking for another trophy. Right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that, but it's weird.
It is bizarre.
Yeah, he even he sent he sent Amy's mother a condolence card as well in the mail. Just a lot of stuff that it's just really, it does set off red flags. But
absolutely. I mean, that goes beyond just a little weird.
It really does. But he was interviewed by police, by FBI. The FBI has said they do not believe he's the killer, though. He committed suicide just a few weeks after Amy's body was found. He drank a mixture of dry gas and Coca-Cola.
What's dry gas?
Dry gas is a fuel additive that we don't really have it down here because we don't have that many freezing temperatures.
Oh, okay.
But it's something that you add to gasoline in your tank in case there's some water in it to keep that water from freezing.
Okay. Yeah, not something we would need a lot of down here.
No, but it does sound like a terrible thing to put into your body.
That probably wouldn't have killed him instantly, would it have?
No, and I found one place that said that he lived for 3 days after drinking that and then died.
Now, do they believe that his suicide had anything to do with the investigation? I mean, whether he's the culprit or not, do they think that the pressure from the investigation may have hastened his death wish?
Yeah, that definitely would have been a factor. Now there are some people that believe that he committed suicide to try to, hide the fact that he had killed Amy Mihaljevic, right? Mm-hmm. However, police found no evidence after his death when they searched his home, no evidence whatsoever that he was involved in Amy's death. Now, there were some other factors that he listed in a suicide note that the note did not mention Amy at all, but there were some other factors that did add into, his suicide. This man had been having some relationship issues and some money trouble at the time. He had a long history of depression, and he was having some medical issues. He had psoriasis that was just out of control and very painful.
Okay, so there were definitely circumstances in this man's life that you could see him committing suicide with or without the...
Yes, for sure. And as I said, investigators found no evidence when they searched his home that he was Amy's killer or was tied to her in any way other than inserting himself into the investigation.
Which, again, is bizarre.
It's bizarre, and I can see that if this is someone who was depressed, maybe he was just looking for somewhere where he felt like he could be useful and belong. I don't know. I'm not saying he wasn't the killer, but there's a possibility this was just a very sad situation.
Right.
But it's worth mentioning him at any rate.
Yeah.
I would like to.
I mean, his behavior after the disappearance is enough to...
Yeah. Oh, it's
consider him a suspect as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. But there was also no reports of him ever, having molesting children, having, even attempted to have, any sort of strange relationship with an underage person, nothing like that.
Okay.
So we don't have any real evidence for him either.
All right.
Now, the next person that I'm going to mention is probably the most popular suspect for web sleuths. This is someone that James Renner really likes, or he did at one point. And this is a man named Dean Runkle.
Okay.
Now, Runkle also looks a whole lot like one of the composite drawings, or at least he did at the time.
Okay.
And we've got some pictures of him we can show.
All right.
But Runkle was a former science teacher who lived in Ashland County. That's the county where the body was found. He actually grew up very close by to the location where the body was found.
Really?
Yeah. His parents lived pretty close to that.
Okay.
Now, Runkle, I do want to mention a little bit about some of the different jobs he had done. He was a teacher, a science teacher.
Okay.
He also played piano at Disney World for a while. And
seems to like to be around children.
Yeah, and he worked at a pet store for a while.
Oh.
So these are all jobs where he would be around children.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a red flag.
A little bit.
Now, we have had...
I mean, any indication that he ever, I don't know, inappropriately touched a student or...
So, yes, I found multiple news articles that say that at least one of his students has accused him of inappropriate contact.
Okay.
I don't know, but it's hard to say how true that is. Like, you have to understand if it's just one student. And I'm not trying to say I don't believe the victim, but we don't know with it just being one student how common this behavior was for him.
Right, of course.
Right. So, something may have happened there. We also have several students that say he was connected to the nature center.
What do they mean by connected?
Well, we have a lot of reports that he volunteered there. We have no proof that he volunteered there. I don't.
Okay.
I can't say police don't have proof of it, but
it's not something publicly
available that there is any proof that he did work at the nature center or volunteer there.
Okay.
We have had several people say that he volunteered there or that he took students there. Also, when he was working at the pet shop, there are reports that when they had too many mice, he had donated mice to the nature center.
Okay.
So he does seem to be connected to that nature center that is connected to all these girls.
Seems to be a bit of a tenuous connection, but...
It is tenuous, but when you combine that with, the possible...
Sexual
misconduct, or we don't know exactly what happened,
and the tendency
sort of sexual misconduct, the tendency to want to be around children, the fact that he looks a lot like one of these people. It's
That's reasonable.
It's reasonable. There is one other thing about Runkle, though, that I will mention, and I don't know how much stock to put into this, but it's here. A man named Rick Burns. He owned an auto body shop next to the shopping plaza.
Okay.
Now, on the day of Amy's abduction, there was a man parked at his body shop in the parking space closest to the shopping center. And he said he was sort of staring across the shopping center, right? Now, he remembers this is the day of Amy's disappearance because that particular day was the day that he had brought in a truck that he had restored to work to sort of show it off to people.
Mm-hmm.
And found that someone, this person in particular, was parked in his personal spot, and it sort of pissed him off.
Okay.
So it was the car in question that was parked in that spot that was looking over there. Now, he said that later on that car pulled around to the pumps. Now, that's the article says pulled around to the pumps. I'm assuming that means there were some gas pumps at the body shop.
Okay.
And that when he pulled around to the pumps, there was a young girl in the car that Rick Burns thinks was Amy Mihaljevic.
Okay.
Now,
how certain is he, and did he come forward with this information at the time?
let me get to that because that's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
According to Mr. Burns, he did report this to police at the time.
Okay.
And they took his statement. But according to this article, they never brought any pictures for him to look at. And then many years later, I want to say it was 2009, a local publication had him look at some pictures, and he identified the man in the picture as Dean Runkle. But this was 20 years later.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, it's hard to say what to make of that.
Yeah, it is. And again, if you thought you saw Amy Mihaljevic, should he have made a bigger deal to police about it when they didn't come back? I don't know. I don't know exactly what happened. Now, according to police, they say that the statement they took from him in 1989 seemed to point to the fact that he didn't seem like he saw anything that suspicious that day. And maybe it's just sort of in hindsight, he has thought that these things are a little more suspicious. Right. And I'm not trying to call Mr. Burns into question or say that he's
it's a fair question, though.
I'm not trying to say he's lying or anything, but you have to understand that 20 years later, things may seem more suspicious to you at the time. Right. Your memories may be a little different, and that's why the police just said they decided to go with the report he gave at the time because they think it's probably it's probably fresher.
The closer in time to the event, the more reliable the recollection.
And eyewitness testimony it's not great to start with, right? Because people, they remember things differently.
Yeah.
Even immediately almost. So it's hard to say. Even the fact that he said this was the man when they showed him a picture of Runkle, it's hard to say what to make of that. But that is another piece of evidence against Runkle.
Okay. Yeah. It's worth mentioning.
Yeah, definitely.
Hard to say what to make of it, but
so again, I'm not sure how strong of a suspect Runkle is, but he's a popular one. James Renner really liked him. Now, let's move on to another suspect, and this is a suspect that there's a documentary series on ID about this called the Lake Erie Murders.
Okay,
and they had two sort of true crime.
It's about Amy Mihaljevic.
Well, the first half of the first season is about Amy Mihaljevic.
Okay.
There are different cases, but you got like 4 episodes about Amy Mihaljevic, about 4 hours of it, right?
I'll have to check that out.
I just want to mention there are like 2 sort of true crime experts that they bring in, and one of them is James Renner, and the other is Nick from True Crime Garage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and this next guy is someone that Nick really.
You mean they didn't bring the captain in?
Didn't bring the captain in. But they did have Nick. And this next guy is someone that Nick really seems to like. Like if you watch the documentary, or if you were to listen to the True Crime Garage episode on this, he really seems to like this guy's a suspect.
Okay.
Now his name is Kenneth Stanton. He actually was put into a state hospital in Michigan for molesting children in the 60s.
Oh.
Yeah. And he escaped the hospital, and they put him back in. And then he was released later on. Apparently, back in the 70s or whatever, they thought they could rehabilitate child molesters in a hospital.
So, I'm all for criminal justice reform, but some people cannot be rehabilitated.
No.
In fact, in my mind, like, if you molest a kid, there's really only one novel therapy for that, and that's... Well, we probably shouldn't discuss what that is on YouTube.
No, going to put it on you. We could put it in just the podcast. We're not going to put that on YouTube.
Right.
Yeah.
But it takes care of the problem.
I agree. That is...
You might say permanently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as a parent, I feel like that is the absolute best treatment for a child molester.
Like when I say that I want criminal justice reform, I'm talking about non-violent offenders.
I completely agree.
And not kitty diddlers.
No, these guys should be treated quite violently. Now, let's move on though, because like I said, they thought he was reformed. However, in 1989...
You mean it turns out he wasn't reformed?
Well, no, in 1989, he is molesting young girls in their homes in Mississippi. And there is some evidence he was also doing this in Alabama and Georgia before that. Now, in 1989, however, the summer of 89, he gets caught. He is fleeing the site of one of his abductions, and someone sees him and takes down his license plate. So he has to go on the run from police, and he flees Mississippi to flee arrest. Now, in December of 1989, his car was found in Ohio. Now, I can't tell you exactly where in Ohio it was found. But I do know he was featured on Unsolved Mysteries.
Really?
Yeah, they were looking for him on Unsolved Mysteries. And
is that what got him caught? The call to actions they did in those? Okay. Yep.
The Unsolved Mysteries got him. Well, I say that now. They located him living in Moraine, Ohio, with the Unsolved Mysteries. They had a call about that. Mm-hmm. However, he fled again after he found out he was on Unsolved Mysteries. But while he was on the run, he tried to molest another girl and got caught.
Mm. Did they do the update like they do on Unsolved Mysteries, where they tell you he got caught?
I'm not sure. I didn't look for the update, but I do know he was featured. Yeah, okay. About the.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Now,
I mean, I've probably seen it at some point.
I've seen every episode. Well,
of the old stack.
Of the old stack. I think I've probably seen all of the Dennis Farina ones.
Wasn't there 25 seasons? Something like that? 22?
Are there that many? I don't know. I
want to say so.
Honestly,
I mean, I could be wrong, but that's what I remember vaguely.
Like I just go to Peacock and turn them on sometimes, just let them play.
Man, it's a classic.
It really is. Yeah,
it's the best true crime show. Obviously apart from this one in history.
Well, I think some people would say America's Most Wanted, but I like Unsolved
They're
Mysteries.
Wrong.
Yeah. Well, you don't get like aliens and ghosts to go along with it in America's Most Wanted.
That is fair.
That's
a little more grounded.
Well, for some people that's a good thing. Some people it's a bad thing. Right?
When I was a kid, like I had to grow into my love of Unsolved Mysteries. When I was a kid, my mom used to watch it, and that damn music used to scare the shit out of me. Like I think I get PTSD just hearing it today.
Wow.
I mean, I was like 5.
I get it, I guess. I honestly find the music comforting.
It's bad parenting.
Let's get back to the case. We're getting off subject talking about Unsolved Mysteries.
It's such a good show, though.
Yeah. Well, you guys can see now why we got into true crime. We started early.
Yeah.
But at any rate, he was caught. And the fact that while he was on the run, he tried to molest another girl, that just shows he was very addicted to this. And
how many children were molested Because some asshat thought they could rehabilitate a pedophile.
Well, I mean, to be fair, like these guys get out of jail nowadays and just register on the sex offender registry now. So, I mean, I don't think people classify them as rehabilitated now. They put them on a list and say, you can't be around kids, but we're still letting them out of jail.
That's true.
It's a slippery slope to get into discussion about that, about whether you should just keep them in jail forever, what you do, but it's neither here nor there. This guy kept on molesting kids. He never stopped. So obviously, while he was in Ohio, he was probably doing the same thing. Now, the interesting part comes in where we talk about his methods while he was in Mississippi. This man was molesting these young girls in their homes. And the way he was doing this is he would pose as a police officer or some sort of public official to gain entry to the house, tell the girls, I'm here to look into this, that. I'm a police officer. I'm,
pretty elaborate for a pedo.
Inspect the gas lines, something like that. Come in, and once he's inside, he has an advantage over them. He can, do whatever he wants.
So that's the connection right there.
Yeah. Well, it's similar method, but also you have to realize that this guy had to have been sort of following these girls around to know when they're home alone.
Yeah.
Which is probably something that Amy's abductor did as well, because he knew not to call when her parents were there.
And he knew to talk about her mom.
Yeah. Yeah. So, both cases we have these pedophiles that are doing their homework, they're researching, following these girls around, and they're giving them a story to sort of lure them into their confidence, right?
Right.
Now, the MO is not exactly the same, obviously.
But it's similar.
It's similar, and we don't have any evidence that Kenneth Stanton murdered any of his victims.
Right.
So now that's not to say that he didn't.
Right.
Obviously not.
I mean, after you molest a kid, what can you really put past you?
Nothing.
Is there any bridge that's too far at that point?
No, nothing at that point. Now, I would like to say that maybe we'll get some information from him about that one day, that to know if he did it or not. But he died in prison in 2011, which
it's a shame.
It's bad that we can't get any more information about this, but I'm glad he's gone from this earth.
Yeah.
Can't
argue with that.
I don't know his cause of death in prison. I would like to think it was painful and violent, but don't know.
Cause of death may be listed as inmates discovered he was a pedophile.
That's comforting. That's comforting to me to think that they found out and took care of him. But at least he's gone. We don't have to worry about him anymore. He's not going to get back out of prison and do it again. But he's an interesting suspect. No real evidence. We know he was in Ohio around the time of her abduction.
Oh, okay, well, that's new.
Now, the thing is, though...
Ohio's a pretty big place, though.
It's a big place. He was living in Moraine, Ohio. That's about 3 hours away from her abduction. Doesn't mean that he wasn't traveling around Ohio to do different things. Obviously, I mean, her body was dumped an hour away from where she was abducted. Mm-hmm. So this person did travel quite a bit, at least to get rid of the body. So,
but somebody who does that kind of homework, though, would you really drive 3 hours to have to stalk someone to the length that he would have needed to? Like, to know the things that he knew?
No, though we don't know that how long he was living in Moraine, Ohio.
That's fair.
I mean, he could have been living around Cleveland for a while.
Yeah,
we don't know that. I'm going to say he's an interesting suspect, but again, we don't have any tangible evidence for this.
These links are tenuous at best. Some of them. Are there any of the suspects, or is there any like tangible connection to the victim?
No.
It's disappointing.
No, I mean, other than Harold Bound and his connection with the riding stables,
right, and maybe the teacher,
and maybe the teacher with the possible connection with the nature center.
Right.
But that's a little more tenuous. Now, there is one last suspect. This is the most recent suspect, and I find it to maybe be the most interesting.
When you say recent, do you mean like in the 90s or?
We found out about this suspect in 2021.
Oh, okay.
So
real recent.
Very
then.
recent.
Okay.
Now, what happened is in 2019, an Ohio woman came to police to tell them about her ex-boyfriend. She thought he may have been Amy's killer.
Did she explain why?
Well, I'm sure she did explain why to police.
But we don't.
And,
It's not
well,
publicly
we
available.
know some of the reasons she thinks that. What I'd like to know is why she decided in 2019 that he might be the killer.
Right.
Right. I'm not saying that there's not a reason for that. Maybe in 2019 she opened up a drawer and found some earrings. Maybe in 2019 she actually found out about this folder and said, "Hey, I saw that folder at my boyfriend's house."
But being cynical,
20 years
maybe
ago.
in 2019 she had a fight with her boyfriend.
That's possible.
Caught him
too.
cheating. I don't know.
That is possible too. But police gave this information to the media, so it seems that they were interested in this man as a suspect.
Okay.
Now, his name was not released. That's why I'm just saying the suspect in this
Right.
particular case. According to the girlfriend, at the time of the abduction, she and her boyfriend lived about 1.5 miles from the shopping center.
Okay.
The night in question where Amy was abducted, she said that he did not come home that night.
And how does she know that? I mean, like, how does she know that it was that particular night that he didn't come home? Did she have an explanation for that?
Yes. Actually, that night he called her about 10 o'clock and said, "Hey, have you seen this on the news about this girl that went missing named Amy Mihaljevic?"
So he actually mentioned her by name.
He mentioned her by name.
Now
Well,
that-
now she says by name. He may have just said, "Have you seen this missing girl on the news?"
Right.
But he mentioned her specifically.
That is interesting.
Yes. It's very interesting. Now, I would like to point out something else about this, and this is a bit of well, it may be a little bit of a stretch on my part, but and she says he called her about 10 o'clock, right? Now, from everything I've read, this became widely known by the public on the nightly news that night.
Okay.
All right. So Ohio, that's central time zone, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Right.
Yes.
So the news would come on at 10 o'clock in Ohio.
Seems reasonable.
So
Oh, it's possible that he
he's
couldn't have
calling
known
her-
about it yet.
right. I mean, maybe he was just watching the news exactly when it came on. I don't know. Maybe they mentioned it on the radio earlier. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd like to know a little more about the timeline there, but
Yeah.
it's got to be close either way.
It has been. I've actually tried to do a lot of research to find out exactly when people start finding out about this, but that's hard to find.
I mean, surely he would not be dumb enough to ask her, "Hey, have you seen this on the news about this girl?" when it hadn't been on the news yet. I would hope no one's that stupid.
and now that I have to say that is not something I've read in any article either. Someone brought that point up, but it's something that struck me about this suspect. There's plenty of other stuff about this suspect though. The girlfriend says that she does believe that she traveled with her boyfriend to Ashland County on multiple times, and that she believes they did go down that particular road where Amy was found.
Really?
Yes. Even more interesting about this is that on the day Amy's body was found, police, the FBI actually, set up in the nearest intersection.
Okay.
And they wrote down the tag numbers of every car that went through that intersection. Just to sort of see if anyone is, returning to the scene, trying to see what's going on with the investigation. His car did go through that intersection that day.
Really?
Yes. So
now,
his license
was that
plate
a
there.
place that he routinely traveled through?
We don't know.
Have we heard anything from the guy himself? Do we know?
No. We don't even know his name. Right. So we don't know. Now I will say though, if they lived there close to the Bay Village Shopping Center, that was an hour away.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
if his car went through an hour away, drove through the intersection, it doesn't seem like somewhere he would drive through on a normal basis. I can't say he didn't.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Right.
It's hard to know exactly what to make of it, but
yeah. Also, this was like a county road, something or another. This was a rural road, right? So it doesn't seem like a road where a lot of people would just pass by.
right.
And I'm not saying they didn't, but it doesn't seem to be that case, right?
I'd really like to know his routine at the time.
Yeah. Well, this is not information we have. As I said, we don't even know the guy's name. This is just some information that police gave to the media.
It's interesting.
Yeah. But there are also some very interesting things that this man said to police in interviews.
Oh, so we have statements from him.
Yes. And it should be noted he went in to speak to police willingly.
Okay.
He was living out of his car at the time. He was homeless.
Okay.
So that would suggest to me a possible mental illness, because a lot of homeless people do suffer from mental illness.
Yeah, there's definitely a correlation.
I'm not saying that it's always the case. Sometimes you have some hard luck, but most
there's a pretty high correlation between.
There's a high correlation to mental illness with that. So let's remember this man could be suffering from some mental illness.
I'm not liking where this is going.
Well, I'm just, that may explain some of his responses.
Okay.
He did tell police that in 1989 and 1990 he was going through a dark period.
He elaborate on that at all?
He may have, but the police didn't give us that information.
Okay.
Now, there were some other questions that police asked him in the interview, maybe interrogation, whatever you want to call it, that he gave some strange answers to.
Okay.
When asked if he ever called Amy prior to her abduction, he said, "I could have, and it could have been a wrong number."
I'd probably prefer a no to that question.
I completely agree. A no would make me feel better about this guy being innocent.
Right.
But how many police interrogations have we watched? How many coerced confessions have we seen?
Fair enough.
When police just badger someone about one thing, saying, "Are you absolutely sure that you never spoke to her on the phone?"
It could just be an effort not to lie to the cops.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
in case they had some piece of evidence that you're unaware of.
Yeah, because
he's hedging right there.
He is. And, when the cops push you and push you and push you to say yes, especially someone who's suffering from mental illness may decide to just give in and say, well, maybe I called the wrong number one day and spoke to her.
Yeah, we have seen that. That's just true.
And
again, I would still be more comfortable with just no.
I agree. And we have some more answers along these lines.
Okay.
When asked if Amy was ever in his car, he said, "I don't believe so." And then they asked again. He said, "Okay, but I don't know what the situation would have been."
What situation would justify that girl being in his car? How could that have ever happened and just slipped his mind? Like, you don't just trip and have a 11-year-old girl land in your car.
Well, the article doesn't give any explanation of this.
Again, a hard no is the proper answer to that question.
Well, I've thought about it, and I've thought of a possibility. Now, this man actually had a niece that was in Amy's same grade at school, right?
Okay.
So let's just spitballing here. Maybe he loaned his car to his brother, sister, whoever, and they picked up their daughter at school and gave Amy a ride.
I mean, I guess it's plausible.
I'm just trying to come up with like something. I don't know why he would have said that. It's really suspicious that he said that.
I mean, just
but again, maybe police badgered him into some sort of saying something. I don't know. I'm not trying to say police were badgering this guy in an interrogation. I don't know. I don't know why he would say these things.
I say the proper answer is no. I mean, for future reference, the proper answer is you don't talk to the cops. Period. Get a lawyer. Free advice.
Don't take a polygraph.
Ever.
How many times have we said that on this podcast?
Well, they're garbage. They're useless analytical tools.
They will only be used against you. Your polygraph results
there is no good result.
Never be used in your favor, ever. So, like if
they suspect you already, nothing that polygraph does is going to dissuade them. It can only make them suspect you more.
Yeah, very true.
And the research on them, as we've discussed a billion times, like they're not even as good, like they're a little better than a coin flip. They're practically a coin flip. But again, we got a little off.
We got a little off subject. That's okay though. It's okay. There is another statement this man made in that article.
Lovely.
When asked if it was possible that his DNA would be on a curtain found near Amy's body, he said, "I didn't put it there." And that asked if his DNA would be on Amy's body, and he said, "If somebody planted it on her."
Does the word "no" not exist in this man's vocabulary?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's very... The guy is intriguing to me as a suspect. Can I just say that?
I mean, I think that's fair. These are some strange answers.
Now, I can't say that when giving this information to the media, police didn't sort of twist it one way or another to make it seem like he's a better suspect. I mean, this is an unnamed suspect. When I read about it, I thought, hey, this guy's really strong. And then I realized they've known about this since 2019.
Seems like they probably would have acted if it was...
You'd think there would have been an arrest at this point if there is good evidence. Maybe there's not good evidence. I don't know. I don't know why they gave the information to the public. Maybe they just felt like they needed to give an update. You know?
Fair.
I don't know. I don't know. But it's something. And that's a new suspect, less than a year ago that we found out about.
I mean, it's encouraging that they're still... Because, I mean, they found the dog hair recently, too, right?
Well, they found the dog hair in 2016, and then just a few months ago, they announced that they had found Amy's hair on the...
Well, that's somewhat encouraging, then, if they're still finding things after all this time.
Yeah, you're having breakthroughs. That this recently. I mean, we're talking more than 30 years later.
Yeah. I mean, and this suspect, while there's no direct connection, I mean, you got to admit, when you combine the girlfriend's testimony to his bizarre answers to those simple questions,
I think the most interesting piece of evidence against him is going through that intersection.
Yeah. That's one that I'd like some more context on. I'd like to know if he drove through that area frequently.
There was one other piece of information in that article I will mention, though I'm not sure how strongly I feel about it. They said that the car that he was driving at the time, there were fibers found on Amy's body that would be consistent with the upholstery of the car.
Again, fiber analysis is sketchy.
And I mean, you're going by, like the color of it.
I mean, the FBI has had numerous cases overturned due to faulty fiber analysis. Like that term, like those words, consistent with, they do a lot of the heavy lifting in that phrase. They do.
So I can't say anything about that. Neither here nor there on that one, but it was in the article. I may as well mention it.
Yeah, fair.
I think he may be a strong suspect. I mean,
compared to the other suspects,
I'm not sure which suspect I lean the most toward. Honestly, I lean the most toward Harold Bound, I think.
Give me a brief overview of him.
He was the man that lived at the farm.
Okay.
Right. Now, I'm not trying to incriminate Mr. Bound, but there's a real connection there. We know there is a connection to Amy.
Yeah.
And
he was the only one that had a tangible connection, right?
The only one. Okay. He knew Amy. He knew her mom. I mean, we don't know if he spoke to them personally. He knew who they were. They came riding there. There's a real connection. close to their home.
Yeah.
It would be easy for him to go drive by the house from there. There were actually train tracks that ran behind their home that ran behind the farm as well. So
Okay.
yeah, there's a lot there to connect it.
I thought Runkle was interesting as well.
Runkle is very interesting. I mean, he definitely seems to like to be around children. Right? Yeah. You know what though? I mean, that is not wrong in and of itself.
No, of course not.
Because some people like I would say most teachers, you have to enjoy being around kids. Right.
To be a good educator, of course you have to.
Yeah. But you do have that possible connection with the nature center. He looks a lot like a composite drawing, but again, we're talking about a composite drawing from, some 11-year-old kids.
Right.
And I'm not saying that 11-year-old kids can't give a good description, but how much attention did they actually pay to it? Did they think this was a big deal at the time? Like if you just notice Amy walking off with this guy, one of her friends that saw it actually said she assumed it was Amy's dad. So she probably wasn't panicked about it at the time.
Right. Yeah.
She probably wasn't paying a lot of attention.
Well, when you see that your friend isn't concerned, why would you be?
Exactly.
Right. It's not like she was screaming, "Help me" at the time.
So we can't even say how accurate these composite drawings are.
Yeah, I'm curious. With Runkle, you said that there were. Your understanding is there were maybe some allegations that he had inappropriately touched.
Yes.
Now, has he ever been charged with anything?
No.
That's important to me, particularly when talking about the guy.
Yeah,
right?
Found no charges of that.
We should probably stress that then.
No, there's no criminal record of any of that.
Okay.
So we do have the one allegation that I found. I found an article on, but and it just sort of mentioned it. It didn't go into detail about the student.
Was it public or anonymous?
There was no name given in the article I read. Now that doesn't mean that,
of course not,
that we don't have a name, but just a lot of times these articles don't mention the accuser by name. I
like to be very careful about accusing people of things when there's when there's not a lot of evidence.
I completely understand, and like if there were 5 or 10 news articles about this, I'd be a little more ready to
and
to
multiple victims.
But you have to understand, especially in today's media atmosphere. They will report on rumors sometimes.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
And so it was with like 2 articles I found, it's hard for me to say that. But there were a lot more articles saying that students could tie him to the nature center, though. So that's something I'm much more willing to go out on a limb on and say that he probably did have a connection to that nature center.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I think Runkle and Bound are 2 strong ones.
Yeah, I think of all of them, it seems to me, of course, not everything I know about it, I just learned from you, but Bound was probably the most intriguing of the suspects you discussed.
Yeah. I won't say Stanton isn't intriguing just because he did seem to be operating this way. Already, but we don't have a connection to Amy other than the fact that he was in the same state.
Yeah, it's
and I don't want to chase that down like we used to tie people to Israel Keys, right? Because, a lot of people have tied people to Israel Keys because he appeared to have possibly been in the state at the time, right? But,
yeah.
But it's hard to say that on this, but he's intriguing as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to think that this new unnamed suspect, there's a lot of hope there, but I don't know.
Yeah, that does seem promising, particularly if the girlfriend's recollection is correct.
Yeah, but how many? And
she's telling the truth.
How many times do in these types of cases do police give us information about a suspect and it never comes to anything?
The overwhelming majority of the time.
Yeah, because I know police, they're always under immense pressure to solve these big name cases.
Yeah,
that have been unsolved for so long,
and they always keep details back that we don't even know about.
No, they do, and
which is understandable.
It's understandable, and we don't know what they have that we don't know. We don't know.
So is that the last of the suspect pool?
There are several other suspects we could mention. These are the ones I felt like were the strongest, other than the false confession, which I just wanted to mention because anyone that goes in the middle of a church and says, "I did it," that's crazy. But other than that, these were, I felt like, the strongest suspects.
I'm guessing there were more of the internet suspects.
Oh, there are a lot of them. There are a lot of them. Yeah.
That we probably wanted this episode to end at some point this year.
Yeah.
Though,
so yeah, we didn't want to keep going into them. I mean, I could have gone with another 10 guys, if we wanted to, but God, I don't think there's any point in most of them.
Yeah.
But you could go on Reddit and read about a bunch of them if you want. Thank you for listening to Fact and Suspicion. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. If you have any feedback for us, or if you have a case you'd like to suggest for us to cover, we'd love for you to reach out to us through email at factandsuspicion@gmail.com or through Twitter @andsuspicion.